Hello everyone, and welcome to the game you've all been waiting for. It's Alireza Firouzja versus Magnus Carlsen, and a lot of you have suggested it as soon as it finished, and for good reason, since, well, there was some controversy at the end, but not really. What I mean by this is that we're going to explain that when we check out the game. So without further ado, Alireza with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5 by Magnus, so not going for his Sicilian. We have knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board. We have a6, Morphy's defense. I think this is the first time Magnus goes for this in the Rapid and Blitz Championship. Bishop to a4 and d6 now, the Steinitz defense by Magnus. We have castles. And the bishop to d7. c3, we have g6, preparing to flank Ke2 the dark square bishop, and the d4. Magnus goes bishop to g7, we have h3 and the knight to f6. So this is all very standard stuff, but here Alireza goes for bishop to c2. A lot of moves have been played here, but not bishop to c2. This is a new move, but it is possible that they will transpose it into some game that was played after this move is played. But okay, as of move 9, we have a completely new game. Magnus castles and rook to e1. So pretty much all standard Ruy Lopez moves. Rook e8, knight b to d2. The knight is now coming to well, to f1 and then to g3 or maybe e3, depending on what black plays. We have queen to e7, developing the queen, connecting rooks, and knight to f1. We have queen back to f8, and now Magnus will try to trade off the dark square bishops with bishop to h6, knight to g3, and bishop to h6. Now this is how Magnus will try to trade down some pieces, but Alireza is not interested. Knight to g5. So he keeps the tension. Knight to d8. Now Magnus will remaneuver this knight over to e6 to try and kick away or even trade off the knight. Bishop to b3 with control of the e6 square, but also attacking the f7 pawn. Knight to e6 and now h4. Again, Alireza keeping the pressure. We have rook 8 to d8 and now bishop to e3. Continuing development. Now, as nothing is happening here, Magnus goes back, bishop to g7, and Alireza continues to push. We have h5. So now that the knight is no longer protected, Magnus goes back, bishop to h6. We have queen to c1, adding another defender to the knight, and now knight to g4, attacking the bishop on e3. Here, Alireza captures. We have knight captures on e6, and here Magnus finds the very nice f captures on e6, which prevents Alireza from trading with bishop captures on h6 because of queen captures on f2 check, king h1, and queen captures on g3 with mate to follow. So Alireza goes a rook to f1 instead, and now Magnus just grabs the bishop. We have knight captures on e3, winning the bishop pair, f captures on e3, and queen to e7 now. We have h captures, and queen to d2 now, preparing to bring the other rook into the game, and now e captures on d4. You cannot capture with this pawn here due to the pin, so c captures on d4 and king g7 now, getting away from this pin. Rook to f3, Alireza now prepares to double up on the f file, and now rook to f8 by Magnus. Countering the rook, we have rook a to f1, and now, well, Magnus was considering some bishop to b5 action, but you don't really force white to trade on f8, as knight to e2 will be a useful move for the knight. So Magnus decides against this. We have rook captures on f3, rook captures, and just rook to f8. Now, getting rid of all the pressure, and now Magnus wants to enjoy his bishop pair. We have queen to c3, and here Magnus got lower on time than Alireza. He had to think things through, as the c7 pawn is under attack, and also you have to take this check into consideration. So Magnus just played c6. If you open up a discovery, then just e5 can be played. Knight to f1, now the e3 pawn is nicely protected, the rook and queen can move, and e5 by Magnus. We have rook captures on f8, king captures on f8, and now queen to c4, threatening the sneaky queen to g8 mate, since the queen prevents Carlsen from escaping. Queen to f6, freeing up the e7 square for Carlsen's king, and now queen g8 check doesn't really do anything. King just moves to e7, and that's all there is. So d captures on e5 instead, d captures, and now queen to b4 with check. Checking the king and attacking the b7 pawn. So Carlsen missed this, and he didn't feel Glad. It's basically blundering a pawn, which pretty much the same as he did against Nodirbek. So he played c5 here. He would like to give up this pawn instead of this pawn. So after check, then move the king or block with the queen. But Alireza still grabs this one, as it messes up Carlsen's pawn structure. And now we have bishop to b1, b5, threatening f1. Queen to c8 with check. And now the problem is you cannot go here because of queen to g8 mate. So Carlsen has to go king to e7, and now Alireza grabs the c5 pawn as well with check. Queen to d6 blocking, and now Alireza just trades. We have captures, and even though Carlsen has the bishop pair, he's down 2 pawns. But Alireza has a doubled e pawn. Still, white is definitely better here. Bishop to f7. Attacking the pawn, pawn to g5, but not yet. First Magnus trades, bishop captures, and you cannot move the knight if you don't want to lose the e3 pawn with check. That's why bishop to f7 was played. Bishop captures, king captures. Now Magnus goes into the opposite color bishop endgame, where he's down a pawn, but he's confident that he will be able to hold this, since white is able to only create one passed pawn. So g5, we have king to e2, and now bishop to f8. Now Carlsen has to create a strategy how to hold this position. We have king to f3, king to e7, attacking the bishop, bishop back to c4, and now a5, putting the pawn to a nice dark square. King e2, and the king to d6. Now we have bishop back to d5 and the bishop to e7. So this is the structure that Carlsen will use to hold, but king to f3 now. Now the king is coming to f5, and this could pose some problems for Magnus. We have bishop to d8. Carlsen can't do anything, he just has to wait. King to g4, and now bishop to e7. Not often that Magnus finds himself in such a position. We have king f5, bishop back to d8, and g4 now. Bishop back to e7, Carlsen just has to wait. a3, preparing to create a passed pawn with b4, and you can't create a blockade because a4 is a light square. White will very easily pick it up with the bishop. So bishop to d8, b4, now a captures. Alireza has successfully created a passed pawn. We have bishop to e7, and now he continues to push it. We have b5, bishop to d8 by Magnus, holding the b6 square, while also holding the pawn here. And here we have king to g6 by Alireza. Both of them were extremely low on time here. King to c5 by Magnus, going after the pawn, and now king to f5, again threatening to grab the pawn here, and Magnus captures it. We have king captures on b5, king captures on e5, and king to c5 now. We have king to e6. Now it's hard for Carlsen's king to get back into the game. Bishop to a5, and now we have e5. We have bishop to d2 by Magnus, and now feel free to pause the video and try to find the winning move for Alireza while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding king to f7. It's the move that wins. For those of you who want to enjoy the show, point is that now this is the threat. You cannot, the king blocks the dark square, so you cannot block with the bishop. First you have to capture the bishop. e6, then bishop b4, you guard e7 pawn, but it's not e7 square, but it's not a problem. e7 captures, and now after king e5, you will simply win the pawn. King f7, and now the 2 pawns prevent the king from going any further. You're gonna have to go for the e pawn, and now just king g6, captures, and of course now this is completely winning for white. However, after Carlsen's bishop to d2, Alireza automatically defends it with e4, and this gives Carlsen a very important tempo. Bishop to c3. Now you cannot go king f7 because Magnus just picks up the e5 pawn. So king to f5 by Alireza, king to b6. Magnus has to go around as all of these squares are covered, so he has to go all the way around. And here again, Alireza misses the opportunity for king captures on g5, because after bishop captures, king goes back, and now you will have two passed pawns to push, which is of course completely winning. But Alireza pushes e6. We have king to c7, and now king to g6. We have king to d8 by Magnus, and now king captures on g5. So now, yes, you have all these passed pawns, but now Carlsen's king is much more active. Here, Carlsen played king to e7. We have king to h5, and now bishop to d2. We have G5 by Alireza, bishop to F4, and now king to G4. Also, a weird decision by Alireza. G6 is just winning here because after bishop to E5, you have king H6 just guarding the G7 square. King F8, you just push E7, bring the king back. G7, bishop picks it up, you capture, and of course now you have a pawn and the bishop, of course, completely winning. But in the heat of battle, with a few seconds on the clock, Alireza goes king G4, kicks the bishop away. Magnus plays bishop to D2, and here Alireza was constantly knocking down pieces, and he was losing a lot of time putting them back. And here, I believe he knocked down his own bishop, and then he wanted to press the clock, but you're not allowed to press the clock if all of the pieces are not in their places, if you knock them down. So Alireza fixed them, hit the clock, but it hit 0-0-0. So here it was in this position that Alireza Firouzja lost on time. Why did he lose on time? Some say that, of course, it should be a draw because Magnus cannot win this game, but it's actually not true. If Alireza plays the absolute worst moves here, Magnus can win this game. For example, if Magnus did not have this bishop, I don't know if the interface doesn't allow me to hide it. If this was the position, then it's a draw. But with the bishop here, Carlsen can still deliver mate. I'm now going to demonstrate how Magnus can deliver mate here. It's a helpmate or a self-mate, I don't know what's it called, but it is possible. For example, king F5, king to F8, let's say king G6, bishop to F4. Let's say E5 now. White has to play the absolute worst moves. The bishop captures on E5, king H7, bishop to B2. Now let's say bishop to E4, bishop to A3, king to H8. We're gonna play bishop to B4. Now bishop to H7, and here Magnus has bishop to C3 with checkmate as well. The king is covering both of these squares, and the light square bishop blocks white from moving. So this is why Carlsen wins this game, and it's not a draw because a checkmate is possible. And the rules state that no one expects you not to play the worst moves possible. So that's why this is a win and not a draw, as so many of you were wondering why this is the case. Of course, in such a top-tier competition, when Carlsen faces Firouzja, of course, it is impossible for Alireza to get checkmated like this. But impossible is a very heavy word, and throughout chess history, a lot of things that should have been impossible were very possible. So yeah. That's why this is a win, and a very important win for Magnus Carlsen, and a very tough loss for Alireza. I think someone wrote in the comments that Alireza also reported Magnus for not... I don't know what he reported him for, but after Magnus blundered a pawn, that he didn't behave well. So I don't know if that will be taken into account, or will this remain a win for Magnus. But for now, at least before I started recording this video, the win was awarded to Magnus. So it will be a tough game, but rules are rules, and this really helps him win his third World Chess Championship title. So tough break for Alireza, but what are you going to do? There were so many chances for him to just win the game, and even though he's a monster player, he really just crushed Magnus here. Once again, an example of why it's extremely important to always study the endgame. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Ruy Lopez, Gleb Kopchenkov, Joseph Matsiar, Hamid Mazuji, and Tasos Arampatsis for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with most likely one more game from the World Blitz Championship to see if Magnus will be able to take home the Triple Crown. And then, of course, we're going to go through all of your suggestions and check any of the games that I have missed. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.